In the far corner of the galaxy, on a quiet and dusty planet named Arkan 7, lived a man forgotten by time. His name was Cole. Once, his name echoed through war zones and command halls. He was known as the Blade of Terra, a fearless warrior during the galactic wars. But that was long ago. Now, Cole lived alone in a small metal shelter built into the side of a rocky hill. He had no neighbors, no visitors, just silence and wind. His only company was a long rusted sword hanging over his doorway. It wasn't sharp anymore. The edge had worn away from years of use, but he never tried to fix it. It was not for fighting anymore. It was a reminder. Cole spent his days gathering fuel rocks and checking weather patterns. He didn't care much about the stars anymore. He didn't check the news. The galaxy had moved on without him. He had seen too much war, too many lies. Peace was all he wanted now. One morning, as the orange sun rose over the hills, a loud explosion broke the silence. Cole turned quickly. A small ship was falling from the sky. Its engines were smoking, and fire trailed behind it. It crashed a few kilometers away, near the canyon. Cole stared at the smoke rising into the sky. He could ignore it. He should ignore it. But something inside him moved. Not duty. He had given that up. Not curiosity. He had buried that too. It was something else. Maybe it was instinct. He grabbed his old bag, placed the rusted sword on his back, just in case, and walked toward the crash. It took him nearly 2 hours to reach the site. The small ship was broken but not completely destroyed. The side hatch had burst open. Sparks flickered from wires. He moved carefully, watching for traps or danger. Then he saw her. A young alien woman, barely conscious, lay beside the ship. She had strange markings on her cheeks, and her dark suit was torn. Her breathing was weak, but she was alive. Cole hesitated. She didn't look like a soldier. No weapons, no armor. Still, he stayed alert. He had trusted the wrong people before. "Help, please," the woman whispered, trying to sit up. "Who are you?" Cole asked in a calm but serious tone. "My name is Lyret," she said. "I'm not a threat. I need help. They're coming after me." Cole looked around. The sky was clear for now, but if someone was chasing her, they wouldn't be far behind. "Who's coming after you?" he asked. "Hunters. Mercenaries. I escaped from a ship. I found something they didn't want me to know." Cole sighed. It sounded like trouble, the kind he didn't want anymore. "Why should I help you?" he asked. Lyra opened her eyes wider. "Because I know things your people need to hear. I was part of something wrong. I want to fix it." That made him pause. Her voice wasn't strong, but her words were. She wasn't just begging for help. She was asking for a second chance. Cole didn't speak right away. He studied her. Her face was tired, but not fake. Her body showed signs of stress, not combat. Maybe she was telling the truth, or maybe she was good at lying. He had met both kinds before. "I have a place," he finally said. "It's not safe, but it's quiet. If you can walk, we leave now." Lyra nodded and tried to stand. Cole helped her. She was weak but determined. Together, they walked slowly back to his shelter. By the time they arrived, the sun was setting. Cole made her a simple meal, dry roots and protein paste. She ate it silently, her hands shaking. He gave her a blanket and let her rest in the corner of his small living space. He didn't ask more questions that night. He just sat by the door, sharpening his old sword with slow, steady movements. It would never be sharp again, not like before. But maybe, just maybe, it still had one more use. Outside, the wind howled softly across the hills. Inside, Cole stared at the blade and whispered to himself, "Let's see if the truth still matters." The next morning, Cole sat on a rock outside his shelter, looking at the rising sun. The air was dry and cold. He had not slept much, even though the woman, Lyra had seemed weak and harmless. He knew better than to trust easily. Time had taught him that the quietest voices could carry the deepest lies. Inside, Lyra slowly opened her eyes. Her body ached, but she felt safe, at least for now. The room was small, filled with tools, books, and strange parts. Everything looked old but well kept. The smee, full of heated rocks and dry wood, filled the air. She stood up slowly and stepped outside. Cole didn't turn to her right away. He kept his eyes on the horizon. "You're awake," he said without looking. "Yes," she replied softly. "Thank you for helping me." "I didn't do it for you," Cole said. "I just don't like watching people die in front of me." Lyra nodded, understanding the cold edge in his voice. She sat down on the ground near him, wrapping her arms around herself to stay warm. "You said someone is chasing you," Cole said after a moment. "Why?" She looked down. "Because I have something they don't want to be known. I used to work in a diplomatic fleet, part of a team that handled interplanetary treaties. One day, I found a file. It showed that one of the peace deals between your people and mine was never meant to last. It was a setup." Cole's eyes narrowed. He said nothing, but inside, his thoughts were racing. He remembered that treaty. He was there when it was signed, and he remembered how it failed just weeks later, how the humans were blamed and attacked. "They blamed us," he said. "We lost hundreds because of that." "I know," Lyra said, her voice shaking. "They used false messages. They made it look like humans planned to betray the deal. But it was all fake. I didn't know then. I believed it, like everyone else." "And now you don't?" Cole asked. Lyra nodded. "When I found the file, I tried to report it, but my request was blocked. Then the hunters came. They were sent to silence me. That's when I ran." Cole didn't respond right away. He stood up and walked inside, returning with her damaged data drive. "This yours?" "Yes," she said. "It has the proof, but it's locked. I couldn't unlock it before the crash." Cole looked at it for a long time. His hands, once strong and quick, now moved slower, but his mind was still sharp. He had spent years cracking enemy systems during the war. He would try. He nodded and placed the drive inside an old scanner. The device buzzed, lights blinking red and green. A few minutes passed in silence. "You might be telling the truth," Cole finally said. "Or maybe this is just another game. Either way, if someone's hunting you, we need to be ready." Lyra looked nervous. "Do you think they'll find us?" Cole looked outside. "If they're smart, yes." She stood up, looking around. "Should we leave?" "There's nowhere safer than here," he said. "They won't expect you to stay in one place." As night came again, Cole moved outside to check the sky. He noticed something. A flash, a brief flicker of light near the hills. He walked back inside. "We might have company soon." Lyra's face turned pale. "How much time do we have?" "Maybe a day, maybe less. Then we need to finish unlocking the drive," she said quickly. "I'll work on it," Cole said. "You get some rest." But Lyra couldn't sleep. Her past was catching up, and she feared that even if they unlocked the truth, it might be too late. Cole sat beside the old scanner, typing slowly. His fingers remembered the codes of war, the patterns of old systems. Time had dulled his body, but not his purpose. He had buried that sword long ago, but truth still mattered. The screen blinked. "Access DNID. Trying OVERID. He didn't stop. He couldn't. If what she said was true, this wasn't just about her. It was about justice, about all the lives lost from a lie. Outside, another flash of light appeared on the hill, closer this time. The hunters were coming. Cole placed his hand on his old sword resting beside the scanner. "It's time to see," he whispered, "if truth can still cut deeper than a lie." The night felt heavier than usual. Cole stood outside, his eyes scanning the horizon. The stars flickered above, but something felt off. The air was still, almost too still. Then the flash came again, this time brighter and closer. The hunters were here. He could feel it. Inside the shelter, Lyra paced nervously. She had no idea how much time they had left. The truth she carried was burning a hole inside her. She wanted to fix the mistake. She wanted to stop running. But what if the truth she held just made things worse? "Cole," Lyra called, her voice low. "What if they don't believe us? What if?" Cole turned to face her, cutting her off. "Don't worry about them. You're safe for now." "I don't think so," Lyra replied, her voice trembling. "They'll come. They always do. What if they kill you just to stop me?" Cole's lips twitched into a faint smile. "I'm not so easy to kill. And if they try, we'll deal with it." His confidence was almost unsettling. But Lyra couldn't argue with the truth in his eyes. She saw something in him, something she hadn't seen in a long time. It wasn't just strength, it was purpose. He wasn't just a man hiding from the past. He was a man who had survived. And that made him dangerous. "Get the drive ready," Cole said, his voice serious. "If they're after you, they'll come with everything they have. We need to be prepared." Lyra moved to the corner where the scanner lay. The drive was now unlocked, and Cole's skills had made it possible. The data inside was more than just proof. It was a weapon, a key to expose the lies that had cost so many lives. But would the galaxy care? Would anyone listen? Cole stepped outside once again, his eyes narrowing at the distant hill. The first wave was coming. He could see their lights in the distance, cutting through the darkness like knives. "They're here," Cole said, his voice calm. Lyra joined him outside, looking up at the sky. The shadows of the trees stretched across the land. But it wasn't the trees that worried her. It was the ships that were now visible on the horizon, slowly descending toward the valley. "I don't want anyone else to die for me," she said quietly, almost to herself. Cole glanced at her. "Then let's make sure they don't." Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to ask if Cole was truly prepared to die for the truth, but the words caught in her throat. She wasn't sure if she was asking for his courage or questioning her own. "We need to move," Cole said, grabbing his sword from the wall. He knew it was dull, but it didn't matter. It was a symbol of the past, and sometimes a symbol was all a man had left. He placed the sword across his back and turned toward Lyra. They walked through the dry grass toward the entrance of the shelter. Cole was already thinking ahead, calculating escape routes and possible positions for defense. His mind was sharp. Time had dulled his body, but his mind was still the weapon he needed. "You stay close to me," Cole said. "I'll protect you." Lyra nodded, though the fear in her eyes was evident. She was no fighter. She wasn't even a soldier. All she had was the truth, and it wasn't enough to save her. But maybe, just maybe, it would be enough to save them both. The ships landed just beyond the hill, their engines buzzing low to the ground. A small group of armed figures emerged, their silhouettes casting long shadows across the valley. They were organized, well-equipped, and dangerous. Cole watched them carefully. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice low. Lyra stepped back, hiding behind a large rock, her eyes still locked on the enemy. She could hear the soft crunch of boots on the dirt, the low hum of their energy shields as they activated. They were ready for a fight. Cole took a deep breath, his heart steady. He had been in worse situations before. He knew what to do. The problem wasn't the fight. It was the truth. If he could get Lyra's message out, if he could make the galaxy listen, maybe everything would change. But the hunters weren't just after Lyra. They were after the proof she carried. Cole reached for a small device in his pocket and tossed it into the air. It activated instantly, sending out a signal to the nearby communication satellites. The plan was simple: send the message before the hunters could stop them. The truth had to be heard. The hunters moved forward, spreading out across the valley. They were getting closer. Cole's grip tightened on his sword, and his pulse quickened. This was it, the final stand. But even as he prepared for battle, he could feel something inside him shift. The fight wasn't about the sword anymore. It wasn't about protecting just himself or even Lyra. It was about something bigger. As the hunters closed in, Cole stood tall, his sword at the ready. He could feel Lyra's eyes on him, and it made him more determined. She had come to him for help, but now she wasn't just his responsibility. She was part of something much bigger, a movement that would change the galaxy. And Cole, he was the one who would make sure that change happened. The first shot rang out like thunder in the still night, cutting through the quiet with a force that made Lyra jump. The sound echoed across the valley, followed by a second shot, and then a third. The hunters had seen them. They were coming. Cole didn't flinch. His eyes were locked on the approaching mercenaries. Their armor glinted in the dim light, sleek and deadly, their weapons raised as they moved steadily toward the shelter. Lyra felt her breath catch in her throat. She wanted to run, wanted to hide, but there was nowhere to go. She had placed all her trust in Cole. He was the only one who could protect her now. "We're not running," Cole said, his voice calm and steady. "We stand our ground." Lyra looked at him, the fear in her eyes deepening. "Are you sure? They're too many." Cole turned to face her, his gaze piercing. "I've been in worse situations. Trust me." The hunters were getting closer, and with them, the feeling of inevitability. Lyra could see the way they moved, like a well-oiled machine, methodical and ruthless. They had done this before. "They'll never stop," Lyra said, her voice trembling. "Once they've caught me, they'll kill you too. They can't let the truth out." "Not if I can help it," Cole replied. "It's not about surviving anymore. It's about making sure the truth reaches the galaxy. You've already done half the work. Now, I'll make sure they don't stop you." Cole drew his sword. The dull edge glinted in the pale light, but it was still heavy, still strong. He hadn't needed it in years, but tonight, it felt like the only thing that mattered. Not because it could fight, but because it was a symbol of everything he had stood for. Lyra looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't help but wonder, could Cole really do this? Could he stop them? She had been running from the truth for so long. But now, as she looked at him, something inside her clicked. Maybe she was running from more than just the hunters. Maybe she had been running from what she knew all along, the truth. Cole turned to face the valley, his eyes scanning the darkness. The hunters were closing in, their movements synchronized, their weapons ready. He could almost hear the click of their rifles charging. They were prepared for everything. But Cole had something they didn't. He had experience. He had the mind of a warrior who had fought in battles across the galaxy. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for something bigger, the truth. "They're not going to stop," Cole muttered under his breath. "But neither am I." He stepped forward, his sword raised in front of him, the weight of it steady in his hands. Lyra watched him, her fear mixing with admiration. He wasn't afraid. Even though she could see the hunters coming for them, he wasn't afraid. Cole's plan was simple. He would take out the first few, force the others to hesitate, and create enough chaos for Lyra to get the message out. He knew he wouldn't be able to hold them off forever. But that didn't matter. He just needed time. Time for her to send the truth to the galaxy. The first hunter came into view, his rifle raised. Cole didn't wait. He moved quickly, closing the distance in a few short steps. The hunter fired, but Cole was already on him, swinging his sword in a wide arc. The blade hit the rifle with a sharp clang, knocking it out of the hunter's hands. Before the man could react, Cole's fist connected with his chest, sending him sprawling to the ground. The second hunter fired, but Cole was already moving again, his body in constant motion, dancing around the incoming fire. He wasn't as fast as he used to be, but he was still skilled. His mind worked faster than his body ever could, guiding him with precision. Another shot rang out, but Cole was already behind cover, his sword held tight in his hands. Lyra had ducked behind a rock, her heart racing, as she watched the fight unfold. She had never seen Cole fight like this. He wasn't just defending himself. He was controlling the battle. Every move was calculated, every step taken with purpose. Cole took out another hunter, his sword moving in a fluid arc. He was efficient, and in those moments, his past as a warrior seemed to come alive again. But as the third hunter closed in, Cole felt the weight of time catching up with him. His body was tired. The years had taken their toll. His sword, once sharp and deadly, was now a tool of survival, not destruction. He could still fight, but he couldn't keep this up forever. He needed to end it, quickly. "Lyra," he shouted. "Now." Lyra didn't hesitate. She scrambled to her feet, the small device in her hand. She quickly activated it, her fingers moving with urgency. The signal was sent. The truth would be known. Just as the last hunter charged at Cole, Lyra's message was out. The hunters stopped in their tracks, momentarily distracted by the sudden data burst. It was enough for Cole to make his move. With a swift motion, Cole took down the last hunter, high, sword piercing the air with deadly precision. The enemy was defeated, but Cole knew this was only the beginning. They would be back. Lyra ran to Cole, her heart racing as she looked at the fallen hunters. The message was out. The truth would spread. And no matter what came next, they had done it. Cole turned to her, his breath heavy but steady. "We've got work to do." Lyra nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. They had fought together, and they had won, for now. The silence that followed the battle was almost deafening. Cole stood over the fallen hunters, his sword still in hand, but the weight of it felt different now. It wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a reminder of a past he couldn't escape. He had done what he needed to do. But the war wasn't over. Not yet. Lyra approached him slowly, her eyes scanning the area. The message had gone out. The truth was in the hands of the galaxy now. But there was no relief in her heart. She had no idea what would happen next. What if the truth was ignored? What if the powerful forces behind the lie still held control? Could one broadcast really change anything? "You did it," Lyra said, her voice quiet but filled with respect. "You stopped them." Cole glanced at the fallen hunters, then at the horizon. The quiet after the battle felt unnatural. The world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "We stopped them," he corrected her. "You did your part. Now it's my turn." Lyra couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. She had been running from the truth for so long, afraid to face the consequences of her actions. But in this moment, with Cole standing beside her, she felt like maybe, just maybe, they could make a difference. Maybe they could expose the lies that had been buried for so long. "I don't know what's next," she admitted, looking down at the ground. "What if they don't listen? What if they silence us?" Cole's gaze softened, but he didn't let his guard down. "Then we keep fighting. We don't stop. Not until the truth is heard." Lyra nodded, but the weight of her past still hung heavily on her. She had worked for the government that had betrayed her people. She had helped spread the false messages that had led to so much suffering. Could she ever be forgiven for that? "I'm sorry," she whispered, looking at the ground. "For everything. For the lies." Cole turned to her, his expression serious but understanding. "You made a mistake. That's all. But you're trying to fix it now. That's what matters." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. There was no judgment in his eyes, no anger, just a quiet resolve. For the first time, Lyra felt like she wasn't alone in this fight. Maybe there was hope after all. Just then, a low hum filled the air. The sound of ships. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. They hadn't been able to hide from the first wave of hunters. Now more ships were coming. The truth was out, but their enemies weren't going to let them go so easily. "They're back," Lyra said, panic creeping into her voice. Cole didn't flinch. He didn't even move. He just stood there, watching the sky, his eyes narrowed. "We knew they'd come, but we got a few minutes." Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. She had been running from the truth for so long. Now that it was out, she didn't know how to face it. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't running anymore. "They'll come for us, won't they?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear. "Yeah," Cole said, his voice calm. "But we'll be ready." Lara didn't question him. She just nodded, her hands shaking. She was ready too. For the first time, she knew what needed to be done. She wasn't going to hide anymore. The truth had to be heard, no matter what the cost. The ships grew louder, their engines powering up as they descended into the valley. Cole looked at Lyra one last time. "Stay close to me. I'll keep you safe." Lyra nodded, standing taller. She wasn't afraid anymore, not with Cole by her side. The first ship touched down in the distance, its dark shape looming against the brightening sky. Another ship landed beside it. The hunters had returned, and this time they weren't alone. More ships were coming, and more soldiers would follow. But Cole wasn't afraid. He had fought wars before, and this felt different. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about ensuring the truth was heard, no matter the cost. Lara looked at the weapons scattered around the ground. She wasn't a fighter, but she wasn't helpless either. She had a purpose now. She had a chance to make up for her past mistakes. "I won't run," she said, her voice firm. Cole gave a small nod, his eyes never leaving the horizon. Good. The battle was coming. But this time, they weren't fighting for survival. They were fighting for something bigger. They were fighting for the truth. As the first group of soldiers emerged from their ships, weapons raised, Cole stepped forward, his sword ready. He knew this would be the hardest fight of his life, but he was ready. Lyra was ready. Together, they would make sure the truth was heard, no matter the cost. The wind picked up, carrying the dust across the valley as the enemy approached. Cole stood tall, his sword raised, his resolve stronger than ever. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about something bigger, something that would change the course of history. "We fight for the truth," Cole said, his voice unwavering. Lyra stood beside him, her heart beating in time with his. They were ready. The battle was about to begin, and they would face it together. The air was thick with tension as the soldiers from the ships advanced, their footsteps echoing in the valley. Lyra stood close to Cole, her heart racing, her body ready for whatever came next. She had never been a fighter, but in this moment, she knew she had no choice. There was no running, no hiding. It was time to face the consequences of her actions and the truth she had buried for so long. Cole stepped forward, his sword held firmly in his hands. He didn't look at her, but she knew he could sense her fear. He had seen it in others before. But this wasn't the time for fear. This was the time for courage, for standing tall in the face of what seemed impossible. "Stay close," Cole said, his voice low but steady. "Don't let them get between us." Lyra nodded, her hands clenched into fists. She wasn't going to let him fight alone. She had a role to play, even if she wasn't sure what that role was yet. The first group of soldiers stopped about 10 meters away. They were well trained, their rifles raised, ready for action. The leader, a tall, armored figure, stepped forward, scanning the area with cold eyes. "You've made a mistake, human," the leader called out. "This woman is a fugitive. She will answer for her crimes. Surrender now, and you'll be spared." Cole's grip tightened on his sword. His mind raced, calculating the odds. He could take a few of them down, maybe even more. But the truth was, there were too many. He needed a distraction, something to buy them time. "I don't think you understand," Cole said, his voice carrying across the valley. "This woman isn't a fugitive. She's a hero. And the truth she carries is more dangerous to you than any weapon we have." The leader's expression didn't change. "You are wasting your time. The truth has no place here. The galaxy doesn't care about your little lies." "I beg to differ," Cole replied, his voice hardening. "The truth will reach them, and when it does, it will change everything." The soldiers shifted, uneasy. Some of them exchanged glances, but their leader remained firm. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," the leader said, his tone mocking. "The peace treaty you're talking about, it was a lie. It was always meant to fail. And you're standing in the way of the truth we've worked so hard to protect." Cole took a step forward, his sword raised slightly. "The truth you've been protecting has cost countless lives, and that ends now." Lyra stepped forward as well, her voice shaking but strong. "The people you've betrayed will know the truth. The galaxy will know. I won't let you silence me anymore." The leader's eyes narrowed. He signaled to his men, and they raised their weapons. The tension in the air was electric. Lyra could feel the weight of the moment, the gravity of what was about to happen. But she stood tall, her heart pounding in her chest. Cole didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, his sword slicing through the air in a perfect arc. The first soldier didn't even have time to react before the blade struck. The impact sent the soldier sprawling to the ground, his weapon flying from his hand. The other soldiers quickly recovered, opening fire. Cole moved with practiced precision, dodging and weaving as the energy blasts flew past him. He was fast, but his movements weren't as sharp as they used to be. His body was older, slower, but his mind was still sharp. And that was all he needed. Lyra ducked behind a rock, her eyes wide with fear. She could hear the sounds of battle, the crack of gunfire, the thud of bodies hitting the ground. But she didn't dare look. She couldn't afford to be distracted. Not now. Cole took down 2 more soldiers, his sword cutting through their defenses with ease. But as the battle raged on, he could feel his energy waning. He wasn't as young as he once was, and the weariness of age was beginning to take its toll. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Lyra's eyes scanned the battlefield. There were still too many soldiers, and the leader, the one who had been giving orders, was still standing, his rifle aimed directly at Cole. Without thinking, Lyra sprang into action. She picked up one of the fallen rifles and aimed it at the leader. Her hands were shaking, but her resolve was firm. She couldn't let Cole fight alone. Not now. The leader saw her move and turned to face her, his eyes cold. "You think you can stop me with that?" Lyra didn't hesitate. She fired, the blast hitting the leader square in the chest. He stumbled back, shocked, but quickly recovered. "You'll regret that," he growled, raising his rifle to fire. Before he could pull the trigger, Cole charged at him, his sword slashing through the air. The leader tried to block, but Cole was too fast. With a swift motion, Cole disarmed the leader and sent him crashing to the ground. Lyra ran to Cole's side, her heart pounding in her chest. The battle was far from over, but they had won this fight. They had stood together, and they had taken down the enemy. The leader groaned, his hand clutching his chest, where Lyra's shot had struck him. "You'll never stop what's coming," he spat. "The truth will always be buried." Cole looked down at him, his sword still in hand. "Not this time," he said quietly. The soldiers who remained scattered, retreating as the truth began to take hold. Cole stood tall, his sword still in his grip, but his heart heavy. This was just the beginning. The fight was far from over. Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "We did it," she whispered. Cole didn't respond. He couldn't. There was still too much to do. The sun had risen higher in the sky, casting its warm light over the valley. The battle was over, but the echoes of what had happened still lingered in the air. Cole stood silently, watching the retreating ships of the hunters disappear into the distance. Their defeat was only a small victory, but it felt like the first real hope they'd had in years. Lyra stood beside him, her hands trembling. She wasn't sure what came next. The truth had been delivered, but was it enough? Would anyone listen? Or would the powerful forces that had controlled everything for so long simply crush their message and continue to dominate the galaxy? "Do you think they'll hear it?" Lyra asked quietly, her voice full of doubt. Cole didn't immediately answer. He turned his eyes to the horizon, where the ships had disappeared. There was a long silence before he spoke. "They'll have no choice," he said, his voice low but steady. "The truth is out now. The galaxy won't be able to ignore it forever." Lyra glanced at him, unsure if she believed him. She had spent so many years running from the truth, and now that it was out there, it felt overwhelming. What if nothing changed? What if people didn't care? "I hope you're right," she said softly. "I know I am," Cole replied. "The truth always finds a way. It might take time, but it will reach them. The right people will hear it, and when they do, everything will change." Lyra wanted to believe him, but part of her still felt like they were fighting an impossible battle. They had made so many enemies, and there were still so many powerful forces at work. But as she looked at Cole, something shifted inside her. He wasn't just an old warrior with a blunted sword. He was a man who believed in something bigger than himself. He believed in the truth, and he was willing to fight for it. "We've done what we can," she said, her voice firmer now. "Now we wait." Cole gave a small nod. "Now we wait."